So Dane, we're back again.
Yes, my bro. How you saying?
Yeah, man, I'm here. Now it goes. Um, second week,
Yep,
Mind Your Business podcast.
this is it.
Yeah, I'll do all the socials later. I was gonna do it at the beginning, but
Yeah, we got that. But
yeah,
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
uh,
man, back to
uh,
discuss the things that need to be discussed.
see it there.
So
How our culture and community are being affected and impacted, and solutions that we find.
we're at a critical point in our collective history, and so I think need to get our ducks in order, or ducks in a row.
Unpack that for me.
Well, I just feel like we're at a very critical point where for me, Index, we are at a point where we have never had more eyes on our culture than we have now. Like, I feel like the digital landscape has opened up black culture to eyes who wouldn't have normally seen it. I think that there's been benefits to it, that we've been able to kind of get around a lot of gatekeepers and be able to platform ourselves in ways we've never been able to do before. But at the same time, I think that the culture does require some element of gatekeeping and protection, because there's a lot of it that's been subverted. I'd say a lot of it's been infiltrated, and I think a lot of it's been pimped. And I still feel like we're not always the primary benefactors of that, and I think it's having an effect on our peace overall.
Yeah,
I think that we are also in a point now where a lot of the social progress and political progress that we've made in this part of the world seems to kind of be slowly getting wound backwards.
mm,
And, in many ways, we could be looking at it that we might be on the cusp of some kind of cultural evolution. But on the other hand, I kind of worry sometimes that we're like, where they say, if you put a frog in a pot of boiling water, they'll jump out. But if you slowly heat it up, then they won't notice that it's being boiled alive. And I sometimes worry that we might be slowly feeling that heat, and we're not really, world's getting hotter in it, and we're not really paying attention to like how it's affecting us.
Definitely. I mean, I think it's all about positioning. And I
Mm,
think over this next 2 years, definitely for sure, while Trump gets his feet under the table and starts implementing the policies that he's going to be implementing, is there's going to be radical change. And you need to, one, see it,
yeah.
and two, be able to reposition yourself so that you are not affected negatively. I feel like that's something that happens with our culture all the time.
Hmm.
It Things just happen.
Yeah.
I can't remember the numbers, but they say, like, a certain amount of people see things, people do things, and then things people just like wonder what happened.
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact quote, but it's like some people, it happens and then they don't even know it happened. And I think, when it comes to our culture, and especially when you're talking about protection, that's the word
Hmm.
that I really want to lean in on, because I feel like there is a degree of protection that we need to kind of afford the culture from, you know, anyone within the culture that really has the culture's best interests at heart. You get me
Absolutely.
throwing, so that we can first be the primary beneficiaries, but also just not being impacted and not know how or where or why, and just things are just happening to us.
Yeah. We
So
don't we don't want to be reactive. There's to be an element
yeah,
of being proactive as the world changes, and to be able to be prepared for those changes. And I'm speaking about myself as well, because things are changing. I feel like there has been a massive like mindset shift of people in this part of the world just over the last 3 or 4 years. It's been a madness. Like we
mm,
were having some very progressive, very explicit, very honest conversations about things like race relations and things like representation.
mm,
And I feel like a lot of that seems to have been wound back, and it's not a conversation that I think reached a conclusion that gave us some
I'm gonna talk
solutions.
about that because,
Mm,
again, like I say, repositioning, it's really about being aware of those spaces that have changed and being where it has been wound back, and knowing about it. But what I wanted to do was follow on from last week's conversation
mm.
where someone in the studio got mad with me when that's when I said that I liked Elon Musk. Anyway, I want to clarify that statement by saying it's not that I like Elon Musk wholesome. Like, there's things I like about Elon Musk.
Mm.
There's things, like I said to you last week, he reminds me of Iron Man. Um, and there are certain nuanced things that I do like about Elon Musk, but I feel like he's being afforded too much power, and I think
Yeah.
the power that he's been afforded. I don't know. I don't know. On one hand, I think to myself, Trump is not that dumb to give him that much power. Maybe he's just allowing him to feel that he's got that much power,
Mm.
or is it that he does actually have that much power?
Well, I'm just going to put this forward just as a theory,
Yeah.
because because I don't want to get us in trouble for any allegations I make. I feel like the relationship between Trump and Elon might be quite simple because of the fact that Elon contributed a significant amount towards Trump's re-election campaign.
Mm-hmm.
I think that obviously his control of like the digital space and the resources he had probably definitely helped Trump. We have to be honest with ourselves. A lot of elections nowadays and a lot of political discourse really takes place on social media, and being in basically aligning yourself with somebody who controls one of the biggest social media platforms in the world was probably a very good idea and very shrewd of Donald Trump. However, I am cynical about the fact that Donald Trump is someone that's happy to share power. I think that a lot of people are aware of this, and so people refer to Elon Musk as the president and Donald Trump as the vice president, hoping to wind him up and maybe to remove Elon Musk. But yeah, I think that Elon Musk has made very attractive, lucrative offers for Donald Trump in exchange for power.
Can I just stop you there?
Yeah.
Is that, are you saying, Dane, trying to get explicit here, are you saying that the more money you have and the more money you contribute to people in politics, the more you can shape policy that affects you or that you're concerned about?
I think, Index, it is the only way
Right.
to shape politics and
Right.
to be able to mold political systems in the way that suit you. And I think that's why the large conversation everyone's having now is that we are now in a technological oligarchy, and that people like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and Mark Zuckerberg and Tim Cook and Jeff Bezos are aware of the power that comes with being able to lobby government, and so they have all pledged their fealty to Donald Trump. Because in 2016, I didn't hear none of these names at the inauguration. I don't think a lot of that, they didn't seem like people were that interested in what
How time
Donald Trump
flew
say.
and things changed in
How
like,
things have changed.
8 years.
Around
literally.
the same time that we've seen the biggest transfer of wealth over the course of the pandemic to some of the aforementioned people and their respective companies, we're now seeing that these same oligarchs or billionaires or tech billionaires, whatever you want to call them, are aware of the power. If they can control legislation, they can control, judicial systems and, the executive branch of government in the States in particular, then, you might argue you can rule the world. If that's if America is, the leading hegemony over the world, they run things, and money also talks, then you can definitely have your desires amplified by the government for the right price. And that's not just in America, that's all over the world.
So then, based on that theory, if our culture had enough collective financial clout, could we translate that into political clout and shape policy in the way that...
That's an excellent question, Index. That is a great question. The question is, if we had all the money and the power, what would the world look like? Well, I think that basically systems like racism and capitalism exist largely based on that fear that if we were in control of the resources that you could argue are indigenous to the places we're from, then this is what the whole world kind of works against. Okay. So I think if we did have that kind of power theoretically, well, it would be a utopia for us, but I think it would be hell for everybody else. Well, that's how they see it anyway. I think that, when you look at places like the United Arab Emirates, who've been able to realize their new fortune in the 20th century due to their oil reserves, or places like Saudi Arabia being exactly the same, or any Gulf state, having just a fraction of that resource has made people immensely wealthy. But then when you look at a country like Nigeria, which is the 6th largest oil reserve in the world, I believe, that might be wrong, but top 10 at least. And yet when people go to Lagos, or people go to Abuja, they're like, yeah man, power cuts and blah blah. So how can I look at someone like the United Arab Emirates, and their oil has made them very wealthy, but then when you think of a place like Nigeria, then I think of like the Biafran War, which is like, they say BP was largely involved in financing that war. Or I look at places like Equatorial Guinea, where Margaret Thatcher's own son Mark was arrested but released, unlike the rest of his accomplices, for using their resources to finance a coup to access those resources. So I think if we did have more power, we were able to exercise our power, then the landscape would look very different. And we probably wouldn't even need discussions like this all the time, because we would be aware of our power. And I think but by that same token, I feel there's a lot is invested in us not realizing that power. Yes, I think that there is a lot invested in things like, whether it's when we talk about, people refer to like African countries as welfare states. I think a lot of that is more down to the fact that Western countries will financially cripple these economies so that they don't have to compete with them.
Right.
Because countries which want to have emerging. So, for example, in Ghana, they talk about like lots of this fast fashion ends up washing up on the shores of Ghana, and that affects Ghana's tourist industry. That affects their ecology. That also affects their own textile industry. So, a lot of these countries, rather than having their own domestic textile industries, they just get clothes that are imported all the time as well. Like, does no one think it's not mad? I cannot think of one African nation with its own automotive industry.
I mean, that's going to be another conversation. That's on the menu. That's on the list of menu.
But I feel like, like I said, I feel like there is a reason for that, because you can get rubber in Africa. You can get steel in Africa. There's no resource that goes into making a vehicle.
You know what's weird? I want to catch this part where you talk about fashion. It's weird how fashion coming from Africa and the continent makes its way to Western countries, makes a lot of money, and then it's rebought back into the continent.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what happens. The raw materials are taken out of the continent.
Mad.
At a very nominal price.
I want to make people know that, because you see, like a few years ago, baggy jeans weren't in.
Yeah. Boot cuts was the worst thing you could be doing.
You get what I'm showing you?
Yeah.
Everyone's wearing boot cuts, and who do you think? I mean, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I never saw anybody but Afrobeat artists doing it.
Absolutely.
You get what I'm showing you?
Absolutely.
They the ones who brought it back.
Yeah.
Like, I used to see I went to Nigeria a few years ago, and I remember seeing man in boot cuts them times there, and like, not Timberland boots, but something similar.
Listen, all African man in the 90s, African man used to dress like New York rappers from the 90s. It'd be Timberlands, big old boot cuts. You have the big hoodies. That's how white girls dress in gentrified neighborhoods now.
I went there in October, blood. It was hot. I was wondering how man was surviving. Like, these men are just walking around that's easy in jeans.
For the sake of the drip, you got to respect it.
I refuse. I think they're just used to it.
Yeah, they're used to it. They've acclimatized. But it's interesting. It's interesting that like they've brought it back. But like I said, I noticed like when you go around gentrified neighborhoods in London, like you'll see white girls in baggy hoodies and baggy jeans and Timberlands. It's like everyone's dressing like Chuka and Tunde now.
If they just sold it directly from the continent, there would be no need for it to travel the world.
Well,
and is there part and parcel of what you're saying about
fashion weeks as well? Is there a fashion week in Johannesburg? Is there maybe there's probably one in Johannesburg, but is there a fashion week in somewhere like Kinshasa? Or is there a fashion week in Lagos? Is there a fashion week in like Addis Ababa? Is there like, because a lot of the haute couture fashion houses have definitely taken their inspiration from African culture.
Prints. Yeah. I mean, Louis Vuitton's print.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No.
Anyway, let's not get in. We'll do all that. I want to get back to Trump and talk more about Calvin Robinson. The mixed race.
Yes. The mixed race. So for those who don't know, so Calvin Johnson,
mixed race person,
was I think he was had no background before working within the church, but has been a ordained minister for some amount of time. But is also has very alt-right views when it comes to gender politics, when it comes to racial politics, is anti-immigration, and definitely aligns himself on the right side of politics, which a lot of the times seems to be contradictory to the doctrines of biblical belief. Anyway, he is a minister who definitely aligns himself with the likes of Elon Musk and Donald Trump, and definitely spouts a lot about being a very proud Briton. Definitely is for the proliferation of the empire, but definitely downplays things like racism and stuff as well, which he does while having an afro. Now, this is somebody who I've seen when they've had interviews and they've spoken and been a pundit on shows, and I actually spoke to him on a podcast myself. And in a very, I say in spirit, it went to a heated debate, but he had asked me why I am so overly passionate about like asylum seekers and stuff. And I was like, you do know that the person that started your religion was a refugee. Like had to run from King Herod. That's like a basic part of the nativity play at primary school. That Jesus is born in a stable, in a manger in Bethlehem, and then King Herod sends the man them for Jesus, and they've got a dip. So he's an asylum seeker. So why don't you like asylum seekers? Is the question. But so anyway, I guess he feeling empowered by Elon Musk's very recent awkward gesture or a Roman salute, decided he would do the same, and in a very recent conference told the audience that the heart goes out to him and mimicked the same salute that Elon Musk did. Now, where people like the ADL and people like Piers Morgan rushed to defend Elon Musk, that same defense was not forthcoming for Mr. The mixed race Calvin Robinson for some strange reason. And he has now lost his ministerial license and is no longer a member of the Church of England because they found his actions to be way too deplorable and unacceptable. And clearly, he must be surprised by that. But I guess he decided, on stage today, I'm going to fuck around and I'm going to find out. And what he found out was not great. Sorry, Calv.
So what are we saying? Is it race related or
What are we saying? Well, what I'm saying is that some people need to understand that there is a rule for you and there is a rule for other people. Like just like when there was a big old MP expenses scandal, the only MP I know that went to prison was a black MP. So there's different rules all the time.
Yeah.
You know, if you are someone who is convicted of in a civil case for sexual assault, it's not likely, or if you're a convicted felon at all as a black person, it's not likely you're going to have a good chance of becoming a world leader. Whereas there are many world leaders that have many cases that we know of, and they are doing just fine. So I feel like there is definitely, probably to Calvin's surprise, a racial aspect involved. Because he must have been like, nah, I want to be.
Reverse ally.
Of course. And obviously he just took it too far. And this is what you tend to find. Me personally, I see with a lot of I suppose black and brown people tend to identify with right wing or alt right politics. In the same way that you do in your normal walk of life, you got to work twice as hard to get the same results as your white counterparts.
But then I find that the same thing on the left. The left ain't really doing anything.
They're not doing anything. There's no left anymore. Let's get that out of the way. There's no left anymore.
I'm glad you said that.
There's no left. If we're going to look at the political spectrum, where Labour used to be on the left, and you could say that the Green Party may be on the left as well, the right would be, or I guess you could say that Labour and the Conservative parties were close to the centre, and one's on the left, one's right of centre, and you have more alt-right where you may have Communist Party on the left, and then you've got like Reform on the right, or BNP on the right. What I think a lot of people have observed is that towards the end of their administration, the Conservatives became more and more alt-right. I think in order to them to compete with the likes of UKIP and Reform, since UKIP have dissolved, they've been reimagined as the Reform Party, and I think that the Conservative Party lost a lot of the voting demographic to Reform, and so have started to have a lot more right-wing rhetoric. But yeah, the truth is, and this is the sad truth, is that clearly the right have seen the benefits of weaponizing diversity and inclusion and weaponizing that to their ends, where we've seen, people like Kemi Badenoch, and we've seen, people like Calvin Robinson and Priti Patel and Suella Braverman. Whereas providing a platform for black and brown members of parliament to represent the voice of their community is definitely not forthcoming from the Labour Party, as we saw when Diane Abbott was basically received a death threat from the Conservative Party's biggest donor, Frank Hester, where let's not forget what he said about Diane Abbott. And then in Parliament, when everybody was having a conversation about it, the one person that wasn't allowed to speak was Diane Abbott. And Keir Starmer did nada. No, didn't do a thing. And as time goes on, even when Labour had a shot of actually having an MP that had a chance of beating the Reform Party in Southend-on-Sea, where they had one of their biggest and most powerful constituencies, Labour made him stand down, where they would have been able to have that kind of representation, because it's more important for them to continue. They feel like it's more important for them to appease this resurgence of fascism and this alt-right politics, and continue to try and pander to them. And Keir Starmer continues in his rhetoric to say more and more things that pander to the right wing and pander to former Conservatives, rather than solidifying and consolidating the Labour voting base and forming coalitions with equally progressive parties that have a lot more in common with them. It's more like he's like, no, we're like them as well. We'll do stupid things like they don't apologize for slavery. I'm not going to apologize for slavery either. I don't care about we don't care about black people. Yeah, we don't care about black people either at the Labour Party. Well, we don't care about trade unions. Yeah, we don't care about unions at the trade. Like
everything that was traditionally Labour and
he's trying to do away with it, and that started with the removal of Jeremy Corbyn, who's now independent, who actually got overall, cumulatively, more votes in his particular constituency than Keir Starmer even got in his own constituency. And I think that the removal of Jeremy Corbyn from the Labour Party has caused massive damage to the voting demographic. And in very recent poll data, seems to be a lot of people reform are leading.
And this is the whole point, the interesting point about Elon Musk, going back to Elon Musk and speaking about how he's kind of dipping his hand into UK politics. For me, he's very uneducated. I don't think he understands exactly what he's doing. I think he's just doing stuff and saying things that just seem to be a bit weird to me.
But when you're 400 billion up, no one tells you no.
Yeah, exactly.
You can say, I'm going to fly rockets to space. And everyone will go, yeah, I want to put some computer chips in monkeys' brains. And everyone goes, yeah. And they go, we're going to Mars. Yeah. When you have that level of money, and like I said, the power that buys you, like, it's very difficult for people to tell you no, even if your ideas are very ill-fated. Like, it doesn't, for example, it doesn't matter how many people try to show us otherwise, the Cybertruck ain't the one in it. The Cybertruck is not doing well, and people are still buying it and all doing the rest of it. And again, it's probably going to come down to our culture to sell the Cybertruck to consumers like we normally do, despite all of its like constant malfunctions. But he's not educated about British politics. He doesn't understand how it works. But you know,
I guess supporting the Reform Party. He's talking about getting Tommy Robinson out of prison, which I'm not that educated on Tommy Robinson to that degree. I just know that he did few bits that upset our community. I don't care about people that. Well, let me take that back. It's not that I don't care. I don't pay much attention to people that are vehemently chatting shit in the way that Tommy Robinson does.
I agree.
I kind of turn off, like, when he continuously pushes this whole Islamification of the UK and the nuances and the misinformation and stuff like that. I just think, bruv, you don't know what you're talking about. You get what I mean? Like, and you're not even in the in the case of the EDL, I don't think he's pushing anything that is really gonna cause.
Well, it's a good question, isn't it? And for anybody who's not of the culture watching this show, my question always would be, if you think Tommy Robinson represents the needs of, I guess, a marginalized community now, which is the white working class of the UK, who has now become an underclass because they don't work. But then ask yourself this: what has Tommy Robinson done to address the housing crisis for white working class people? What has he done to address the healthcare crisis for white working class people? What has he done when we're talking about someone like Elon Musk? How will Tommy Robinson encourage Elon Musk to bring business to the UK, to provide more employment opportunities for white working class people? Now, I can definitely agree that white working class people are largely ignored outside of London, and there is a large group of people up north
who classism we spoke about.
And it's the classism, and there is the working class have been neglected by this government for many years, and I think people come and take advantage of that. And when someone like Tommy Robinson comes along, then even though we say he chat shit to people that have felt disenfranchised and disillusioned by politics for so long, they think, yeah, man, this guy's saying the things that need to be said. And it's very easy to push these buttons because they are old buttons, and it's a very old manual that's always worked. Immigrants are doing this to you. It's rivers of blood. It's asylum seekers are doing this to you. When the question is never like, what are the conditions creating the asylum in the first place? But like, I just think with Elon Musk, he is understands that when people are disillusioned and they are angry, like the working class is in this country and in America, they are very open to suggestion, and they are very open to hearing more radical ideas to change their fortunes.
That swinging pendulum.
Yeah, but it's also, it's like, you know, it's like explaining it to these people. If you give starving people stale bread, that bread will taste like it is fresh out the oven hardo bread. That's how it tastes when you're starving. So if you come along and you say stuff like, I'm going to bring coal back and give you jobs and make you great again, to people who have nothing, they don't need to hear the context. That's just how we're living in this world of populist politics now, where you don't necessarily have to back up what you're saying or break down any policies you have. You just have to say stuff that speaks to people's egos, and it's a popularity contest. Where it's like you said, you see him like he's Tony Stark. If there was a real life Tony Stark, sounds wicked. Like this is someone who exists apolitically, does not care for either side, is more in focus on human innovation and stuff like that. That's, for me, that's the image that Elon Musk is trying to portray. But I just think the truth is not really that. But a lot of people,
and he started to see that more and more, because that again, there's things I like about him. It's not me liking him like as a full person, because I do feel like he's dangerous, and given too much power, it will corrupt anybody. And I just feel like with his you can clear again. I've worked with people that have got Asperger's. You can
Mm,
clearly see this geezer suffers from Asperger's.
mm.
It's mad when you watch him, when watching interviews and things like that. I just think to myself, yeah, you're.
But is he also maybe getting on a lot of drugs? Because when you're a billionaire, people will
Mm,
give you a lot of drugs, and the thing is, I feel like this is an aside for me that when we talk about drugs and medication, especially in places like America, we don't really talk about the side effects. And Elon Musk is probably, as a billionaire, like many billionaires, is very concerned about his heritage and legacy,
yeah,
and is
yeah,
probably looking at a lot of ways he can prolong his life or
yeah.
improve his life. Not just with a hair transplant, whether it's with human growth hormone.
Mm,
And I think when you take those aspects of that lifestyle, plus, like I said, unchecked power, not
mm,
being told no, wall to wall yes men, then it can definitely begin to have effect on your psychology. So even though you think he may be neurodivergent,
mm,
which maybe, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of evidence to suggest that,
mm,
but then I feel like that context isn't necessarily given some of the more extreme things he says.
yeah.
Because for me, I don't care where you are on the spectrum. If you said I want to put brain chips in monkeys and go to Mars, I'd be like, is there not things you could be doing on Earth first before we go to Mars? Because
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and that could be a case, but then I
mm,
do disagree because again, I've worked with people that
mm,
have Asperger's, and when you're in close proximity with people, that there are things that they do and say that you would think without understanding
yeah,
the gravitas of it, what it could be sometimes.
yeah, yeah, and
Yeah, you
you
know what
don't
I
necessarily
mean.
understand the consequences of his actions, which that also reinforces why is there somebody that should have this much proximity
To
to
power,
nuclear
yeah,
weapons
well, to power
and to power in general?
yeah, in
Yeah,
general, you know what I
I
mean.
will give him another theory about Elon Musk here with the whole Mars thing. Yeah, I personally feel like, and this is a mad conspiracy theory from
Mm,
me, I think him, along with other billionaires and this new space race that billionaires are engaging in,
mm.
is that I believe they are trying to create corporate entities off world.
But that's been a thing for years. So, and I'll tell you
Oh,
why.
okay.
Like, in the context of record companies and rights, and they talk about signing you for the world and the universe. That's in case we start marketing records in
They're
space.
already out there.
You get
Because
me?
they put tunes onto like satellites and onto shuttles and stuff when
Well,
they beam stuff out there as well, innit?
so that's the whole point. If there's ever a civilization outside in Mars or any other
Mm.
planet, if you signed your rights to a record company for the universe, it's essentially for the universe, and
Yeah.
they have preempted that existence. I
It's
mean,
it's very
remember
it's
we've
very
been
it's very
watching Total Recall from since the 80s,
right.
so
So
you know what I mean.
legalese,
It's
yeah,
not like a
exactly.
far fetched concept.
But see, my
I
thing
asked
is
this
that
question though,
yeah,
and this is going to be a very quick side note.
yeah,
Do
yeah.
you think we've been to space? Do you think we've been to the moon?
Yeah.
You
I think
think
I think we've
so?
been to the moon, yeah. I
Okay.
think I think that
Do you
space
think that
exploration,
the one that they said, like it was 1960s? I can't
yeah,
remember the
yeah,
exact date with Armstrong and them man there.
yeah.
You reckon they were the ones to go to the moon? Because there's so much evidence to suggest, and times in which they've been confronted with it, and them man are like acting all elusive.
I mean, I think they have, but I also feel like, well, you have to remember that Russia got into space before the
Yeah,
US
yeah,
did, but
yeah.
there's not really a focus on Russia's space. Like India has a space program and stuff now. But I think
Mm,
that the reason for the space program to exist is because it was used to replace certain aspects of the defense industry. Because obviously the space programs began post-war, and
yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like
yeah.
where people would have come back kind of been very world weary and very war weary. We're kind of like, we are not going to, because obviously taxes finance wars. And I feel
Mm,
like a lot of people were like, we're not going to put our money
yeah.
towards this war effort and then not get anything in
Mm,
return.
yeah,
And I think a lot of governments have used the kind of space exploration thing as a way to continue to pump money into the research,
yeah.
and yeah, have less of the tax base towards people. But for me, in terms of the space race that exists now for oligarchs, I think it's because they want to have a corporate entity off world so that they can avoid tax. Because obviously, there's been conversations about global taxation. But I feel
Mm,
like, well, I live on Mars, baby. So I don't
yeah,
know what. Maybe on England you have
yeah,
taxes,
yeah,
but in Mars we don't have that thing.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know what. Maybe in
You know
England
what
people should be
though?
taxed for income, but if
I
you
just,
if you live on Mars, you can
I
get away
just
with it.
don't feel. I don't feel like we're gonna get that far before people start realizing how fake money is.
Yeah, well, crypto is the thing now, isn't it?
Yeah, this is
So
it. So it's not for me. It's not like I don't feel like we're gonna get that far. So if that is the reason for them, wanting to avoid taxes, well, maybe you trying to look for a safe haven. You've got all these millionaires building mass underground bunkers that can survive. Survive like nuclear bombs and all these kind
mhm.
of things. I don't know, maybe it's something to do with that. Maybe they can foresee the end of the world and some sort of nuclear explosion between Russia and America, and they want to get off with a certain amount of people. I don't know. I'm speculating on all of that. But I want to bring it back to the basics because we can go off sometimes. In terms of the impact it has on our culture, what say you?
In terms of
Elon Musk and the
I-
leaning he has in political UK
well,
politics and
yeah.
how that will affect the diaspora at large.
Well, I mean, for me, I'm very concerned because obviously Elon Musk has definitely been part of the drive to do away with DEI initiatives. And even though I'd say that our people are largely responsible for legislation that has allowed for diversity and equity and inclusion, we're not the primary benefactors of that. Like Asians have largely benefited,
We're gonna
veterans
touch
have benefited, and I say that because he's rolling it back. It does make me very cynical about what his intentions are for making Europe great again, as he says. But how it will affect us is that, like, based on the rhetoric that I've seen in the States, I think that might have an effect on us in the same way that, you know, you had the whole Windrush scandal. Then it stands to reason why he wouldn't do the same kind of thing. I think that, especially somebody who profits so much from exploitation of our culture and our people in terms of cobalt and how much that his business model depends on that, I definitely think he would want to have legislation or try to influence legislation that gave him free reign to exploit African resources.
Well, you know what? This rolls into another thing that I wanted to talk about, which is Donald Trump, and obviously we all know he's now the president. We know the thing that happened in the inauguration with the salute and all that kind of thing, but more so, like, what's wrapped up in this is the fact that you've got Trump almost empowering Elon Musk to be involved in these efforts to roll back things like DEI, which is one of the things I wanted to touch on regarding Trump. And, you know, we had this discussion earlier. What's the bad aspects and the good aspects? And the reason why I asked that question, because I don't ever believe anything is all good and all bad, or, you know, vice versa. I believe there's good in some things. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
And when it comes to Trump, we can all see the bad. It's like quite clear. So, you know, going on to
Can we all though? I feel like a lot of people. I mean, I think that Trump has historically provided a very easy focus point for a lot of people's anger and hatred, and a lot of people definitely speak very negatively about Donald Trump. But obviously, a lot of people speak very positively about him, hence him being elected. Or maybe he was spoken about so negatively, it allowed him to assume the status of underdog, and that's maybe worked out in his favor. And I think that it was a very short-sighted of left-wing media in general to kind of demonize Donald Trump without actually giving any context as to why they were demonizing him, apart from being like, he's not a nice guy, he says mean things. Like, it's not really been that effective, because I think for a lot of people in the States, there were much larger issues afoot, and I think that the Democratic Party could have definitely done a lot more to engage with America's working class and to address a lot of the crises that affect the working class in America, as they do here, which again is housing and access to healthcare and you know, health in general, and, you know, economy hard times, cost of living. Yeah,
is a massive
$20 for toothpaste.
And this is the thing, you know, in the same way that you talk about the white working class not being focused on in the UK, it's the same way in which, for me, and looking at the stats and the polls and things like that, why Trump has been supported so massively by, like, men in general, black, white, you know what I mean? Because for a long time, men have been made to feel emasculated, and the system has built its way in which it's just supporting femininity overtly in a way that then starts to discriminate against, you know, masculine. Like, I remember hearing that whole thing, like toxic mixed masculinity, and hearing that and thinking to myself, some of the things now are over leveraged. That people are saying this is toxic masculinity, which is actually just a man being a man, a man having masculine traits and saying, you know what, I want to work, protect, look after my family. You know what I mean? Like, certain little basic things are now, like, looked at as being toxic masculine. And I'm not saying everything, I'm just saying there's certain things there where even me, I got frustrated as a man. I'm thinking, like, why is this toxic? Why does this have to be labeled toxic?
Yeah.
So for me, when you look at it from that perspective, that's one of the marginal gains in which Donald Trump was able to lever to be voted in. And I think that was severely under appreciated by the left, by the Democratic Party, you know what I mean? Rolling out Kamala Harris, and then she just wasn't up to anything.
I mean, it was Kamala Harris taking that position of being the lead candidate for the Democratic Party was more of a contingency plan, because Joe Biden was deemed that he wasn't able to continue, because I don't think he would have dropped out, but I think we saw his alien mental capacities, and everyone was like, this guy is
the madness.
He's 1 minute, he's one conference from walking off a ledge and jumping off a building. So it had to happen. But I think that, you know,
how many times did he fall up the steps going up onto the Air Force One?
That's on the small things. This man just sits there. He just sits there with a glazed look, licking ice cream. When he went and chatted to the curtain, is what I was focused on. Like, you know, Joe Biden. But you know, but for me, I think that like, I wouldn't say I'm a Trump supporter, but I've had to objectively look at what his appeal is. And I think that for Americans in general, the largest appeal has been that when you look at the American lineage of presidents and leaders, maybe in like the last 20, 25 years, they have fallen between a very narrow amount of bloodlines where, you know, you had George Bush and then Bill Clinton, but then you had George Bush Jr. and then Obama, but then you had, but at the time, Joe Biden was the vice president. And then, you know, obviously Trump came into power, and Trump existed outside of the political class. That's what attracted a lot of people. Then we go on to Hillary Clinton, who is Bill Clinton's wife. So people are looking and being like, it seems to power seems to be being brokered between a very small circle, and we're not seeing any change to our standard of living. If any change we're seeing is that it's negative and it's a decline. And so I think that people saw Donald Trump as an alternative and draining the swamp. I think that that's happening along the same time that the economic superiority that the West has enjoyed has begun to wane in power and stuff as well. And I think, you know, there's also a large element, a racial element, and I feel like it would be dishonest and disingenuous to act like that's not a big part of it. Like, I think that white people in America are told that we are a republic, we are a free country, and so anybody can be president. Because when I was going to school in the UK, we didn't do class presidents. So Americans already have this idea that you can become president as well, irrespective of your walk of life. But as they get older, they understand.
But historically, you do know black people historically were Republicans first, not Democratic. I mean, I don't want to go into it.
I know what you mean though. But for me personally, I don't think we're either, and that's the thing that we need to understand. That we're not either. That you know, you could argue that Abraham Lincoln being a Republican was instrumental to the Emancipation Proclamation.
What's best for us at this moment? What's
best for us at the moment? I don't know what's best for us at the moment. But what I think is, I don't think that any part of the spectrum represents our interests, prioritizes our interests.
Definitely, and
that's what I look at. So
arguing that. What
I say what's best for us at the moment is that to be honest with you, I don't think I have an understanding, or I've heard any standout policies that have come from the Trump administration that would make me say, oh, he actually did to do something for black people.
And I don't think he is. I think it's quite the reverse. I'm hoping that this next 4 years will actually kick us into action.
Galvanize us. I agree.
You get what I mean? Because I feel like with the Democratic Party and Labour, what they do is keep our culture in a space of complacency. It makes us feel so comfortable. We don't feel like we have to do anything. And
that's exactly true. And it's not even just that we feel comfortable. I think two things have happened. Yeah, I think complacency is a big part of it. That we feel like, you know, we fought to this point, or things have been fought for us and they've been okay. And even though those rights have begun to be dismantled before our eyes, it's happened in such a small way that we don't even really deep it.
Insidious.
It's very, very insidious. And then the other thing is that I also feel like we've also been kind of bamboozled, because Obama, being a Democrat, made a lot of people think we're back in the game, baby. We're there, blood. We are there.
It's not that time.
Our president's black and his wife is black. We are there. And then you started hearing the talk about a post-racial society. And I've always said to people, at one point, we were at the brunt of the brutality and viciousness, and we still are, of law enforcement. But now there are black police officers. This has not changed the treatment of black people at the hands of the police, in the same way that there are more black people than they would have been historically working within the medical profession. But when you look at maternity mortality in motherhood for black women versus other women, very little progress has been made. So like you said, and this is where This is what
As
you're
to
talking
say,
about the weapons.
women. I think it's less than, but it used to be 5 times more likely to be affected by ill maternal health, either die or
Yeah.
diseases and all that type of thing. So that is a massive issue. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? But when you look at, even I would even go as far as to say, you look at the Tory party. These parties don't make it very comfortable for us as a culture. And for me, it's that is the time when we should be saying, okay, how do we galvanize our resources and create our own space to make it better for us? So this is why I say Donald Trump, the bad and the good, because although people might not see it and people might not understand it, I believe that this is a space in which we can start to really build. When he talks about things like nationalism and, kicking out all the Mexicans or any immigrants for that matter, I mean, I think I read a study about the majority, the immigration laws are going to impact the Ghanaians for the most part. You get what I mean? So yeah, people can look that up, but it affects Africans a lot. You get what I'm showing you?
Yeah, it will
And
do.
being part of the diaspora, it's like, okay,
They call them
but
shit old countries. Like you ain't gonna
you get what
come
I'm
on back
showing
here.
you?
Do you know what I mean?
This is the thing. So now, we know that the resources reside in Africa. We know everyone feeds off Africa. So it's just that we don't have the workflow and the end-to-end processes in place to make sure that we benefit from. And this is the whole thing that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Us being the primary cultivators of our culture. Whether if you live in Africa or you're part of the diaspora, you know that or the everything in your mobile phone, the minerals used in your mobile phone.
Yeah.
All of these things
Or your
come
car.
from Africa. I'm showing your car or whatever the case may be, but we're not benefiting from it first.
It's a tough one with Africa because obviously Africa is a continent that's comprised of a number of different cultures.
Right,
And
yeah,
there can be
yeah.
enormous cultural rifts from somewhere all the way down to Swaziland or Lesotho, all the way up to Algeria
Yeah,
or like Tunisia,
yeah.
where even sub-Saharan countries versus North African countries, there's a very separate and distinct culture. And a lot of people look at us very differently.
Yeah, and I
north.
hear that.
You know
I
what I
hear
mean?
that. But then this is the thing. One thing is for sure. All of them have been discriminated, pillaged,
Colonized,
colonized in the
exploited,
same way,
yeah.
exploited in the same way that, and from these European countries.
Yeah.
I'm showing you
Lot of Arab countries as well.
Arab countries as well. But I'm more focusing on sub-Saharan Africa because for obvious reasons. If nobody doesn't understand, I don't really want to get.
This is not the podcast for you if you don't understand. Let's just be honest. If you know, you know.
You get what I'm showing you, so
Yeah.
it's just that. But the point being is, collectively, this is, again, I go back to that word about collective financial clout. You get what I'm showing you? These are the things that really people focus on, and that's what you can galvanize or use to protect your community or your culture. We don't have that in the diaspora very much. But then Africa, talking more about sub-Saharan Africa, there is a case to be said that everyone can see what's going on here. We can all see. So why are we playing around with it?
As we discussed last week, it's beginning, and we're
Yeah,
starting to see some people with
yeah.
with people like Ibrahim Traore and other associates working with like places like Mali and like Niger as well. So we're starting to see it.
Yeah.
So the question is being asked.
Yeah.
It's just like you said. But then are we on a very tight time scale where our survival and our existential comfort is largely dependent on how quickly we get our shit together.
So this is the point. So for me, even if you talk about DEI being rolled back, I think in some ways it's a good thing. Because then what I find as well is that a lot of people, and this is not everybody, but there's a few people I know that have been working in the DEI space and become very complacent or over leveraging and time and resources and money and things like that we don't actually need as a community, or could be reallocated to different spaces. And it's almost like you're taking advantage of the chance or the opportunity being afforded in the space of DEI, and actually instead of doing something, it's just kind of like, I'm here just getting a change. And
there you go. That's it. It's getting a change. And this is the thing that is always going to be an issue with our community, is that anytime we make progression, people are always going to be able to leverage access to capital in order to divide and conquer. And like you said, like when a lot of these DEI initiatives were being introduced like 5 years ago, you saw a lot of people being new positions and new posts being created across corporations, and a lot of people and we don't know necessarily how meritocratic that was. But then you could argue then, if you've been closed out of these spaces for so long and someone does offer you a check, then you may not do your checks and balances or think to yourself, maybe I have imposter syndrome and I'm not the black person for this role. You're going to say, boy, now I'm getting a 6-figure check that I was never dream of getting. And when you can dangle that carrot, you're always going to be able to divide people.